Hello everyone, welcome to this one of a series of introductory guides to autism under the umbrella of understanding autism. As I say, this is very generic and every autistic person is unique. For more detailed, more bespoke training, follow the links here or contact me directly from my website, wideforautism.co.uk. This is an introductory guide to autism from an actual autistic and father of two who's been working in the field of autism for over a decade. So we're going to begin with looking at the signs of autism when the slide comes up. There we go, the signs of autism. Firstly, social communication. A lot of autistic people, but again, not everybody, will take language literally. They might not understand jokes or sarcasm, and may have difficulties in expressing or understanding body language. Secondly, social interaction. We'll look at that next. Many autistic people find difficulty in forming relationships and friendships or maintaining them, and some find it difficult working in a team. Many autistics have rigidity of thought, so we're looking at that a little later too. And so autistic people often need routine, find changes challenging, and have difficulty in empathizing. But again, this isn't one size fits all. Some autistic people are over empathetic. I'll class myself under that category. And then we'll briefly look at behavior. I say briefly because there will be a further presentation at another time giving more detail on behavior and sensory issues. So we'll look at sensory sensitivity, just a brief overview, and look at rituals and obsessions, as it says here, or special interests. The reason why I have the word obsessions in, a lot of autistic people don't like it, but this is how other people will perceive an autistic person's behavior as being obsessional. And that's how it's sometimes looked at in some of the literature. But really, we like to consider it more along the lines of special interests. So what is autism? Well, in a nutshell, autism is a spectrum condition, and all autistic people share certain difficulties, but being autistic will affect them in different ways. All of them will have, as I just already mentioned, will have differences. I don't like the word deficits, although some, when it comes to diagnosing, often psychologists will use the term deficits in these key areas of social communication, social interaction, and rigidity of thought. But for many of us, it's more a difference. It's a different way of thinking. We have a different operating system. It's kind of like I'm using a Microsoft computer at the moment, and it's kind of like that wouldn't work if you were to put Apple software in it, and vice versa. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're deficient or in any way, shape, or whatsoever. We're just different. We're just wired differently. So we process information and process social relationships, etc., in a different way to neurotypical individuals. So for all those three conditions, social interaction, social communication, and rigidity of thought, all of those differences have to be present in order to get a diagnosis of autism. So some autistic people may have learning disabilities. Now, some people describe autism in itself as a disability. Yes, it is classed as a disability under human rights legislation, disability discrimination legislation, but many autistic people do not consider themselves as having a disability per se. Some autistic people, around about 44%, do have an associated learning disabilities, but many have an average or above average intellect. Some have an extremely high IQ. But I would argue that everyone that's autistic is disabled in some way, or albeit for some individuals like myself, the disability is more in how society perceives us and the hurdles that are put in our way with respect to finding employment, obtaining relationships, difficulty possibly in meeting your potential in education, this one size fits all in education that we have now. And many of us will also have mental health issues or other conditions. Now, autism in itself is not a mental health illness or condition. But having said that, because a lot of us struggle with sensory issues and relationships, etc. And those of us at the higher end of the spectrum are aware that we're different to neurotypical individuals. A lot of us have considerable anxiety at times. And that's probably also coming across in my voice now. I'm talking to a blank screen, so I'm not getting any feedback. So it's probably coming across as nervous on camera. So people with autism, or as we prefer the term, autistic individuals, need different levels of support. So all autistic people have varying degrees of difficulty. While behaviours associated with severe autism are usually evident, those on the lower end of the spectrum do not necessarily show obvious signs of autism. Like this young person here, I have Asperger's. I do have some quirky behaviours, habits and rituals that might confuse you, amuse you, surprise or annoy you. We'll talk a little bit about Asperger's syndrome in a few moments. Social communication difficulties. Some autistic people may not speak or have limited speech, or some may have quite a severe language delay and then suddenly go from absolutely no words whatsoever to complete sentences, maybe at the age of 3, maybe at the age of 6, 7, even 8 or beyond. So no babbling necessarily, and they go straight from no babbling to complete sentences. Others develop speech in the same way as other people. They will often understand more of what other people say to them than they're able to express. But some autistic people, it's the other way around. They're able to express themselves and they come across as very capable, but they're not able to receive every single word that's spoken to them. What my daughter calls the wow words in the conversation, those important words. The English language loves lots and lots of different words, lots of filler words when we talk. And sometimes those filler words get in the way of us understanding the clear message that someone's trying to tell us. So some autistic people, because of their language difficulties, use an alternative means of communication, such as sign language or visual symbols. This young man here, I don't talk. I can use sign language to communicate, but not many other people who understand it. Instead, I use a communication book and PECS symbols. For those that aren't familiar what PECS symbols is, I'm not going to go into great detail about it, because that will be in another video I should do in a few weeks' time. It means Picture Exchange Communication System. Basically, it's a series of picture cards that enable that person to communicate and other people to communicate to them. So they're able to say, for instance, they'll have a picture of a bus to indicate they want to go on the bus, or a picture of a drink to indicate that the person would like a drink. Sometimes also accompanied with a sign as well. So again, some people with autism struggle with abstract concepts, and others may repeat words or phrases. This repetition is called echolalia, from the obvious word, echo, 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 because they repeat that last part of the word. For example, this young man here, the father saying, "Do you want to drink a juice?" And he's replying, "Do you want to drink a juice?" And you may say that ad infinitum. And a lot of autistic people, particularly young children, are like to hear the same words and phrases repeated over and over again. It gives them some sort of comfort. The rhythm, the cadence of the sound can give a lot of comfort if they're anxious. And again, autistic people may not be comfortable with eye contact. It's a fallacy to say that all autistic people have difficulty with maintaining eye contact or don't express eye contact. Many don't, but many find it quite difficult. They might look beyond the person, they may look away. And of course, that inability for some individuals to maintain eye contact causes them, may cause conflict in the home or at school, where father, mother, or teacher is saying, "Look at me when I'm talking to you." And trying to force an autistic person to look at your face when you're talking to them is viewed by many autistic people, myself included, as a form of abuse. At the end of the day, we don't use our eyes to listen, we use our ears, but culturally we are expected to look at someone when they're talking to us. However, in some cultures, such as Southeast Asia, Japan, China, it's considered disrespectful to maintain eye contact when someone is speaking to you, show reverence. So again, this is a cultural thing. It's dependent upon the society in which you live in, which explains why in certain cultures that are more strict but less observant of things like eye contact, autistic people may, in that respect, thrive better than they would in the West. So this young man here, I find it hard to look at people when they're talking to me. Looking and listening at the same time is too demanding. It takes too much processing, but I am listening. I've got a little picture posted on my wall. I'll finish off with this later, but just this one line here. I am listening. I'm not looking into your eyes because I'm trying to concentrate on your words. I'm paying attention, but I just can't process any more information. So bear that in mind. I take things very literally. So if you say it's raining cats and dogs, I may think it's literally raining cats and dogs. And the English language, as I mentioned earlier, loves these sort of weird and wonderful phrases. And there's a picture there of a man who's literally got his umbrella up, and it's literally raining cats and dogs. This young man with his basketball, he's saying, when I first meet someone, I don't know what to say. I have difficulty making small talk. However, I'm really happy to talk about basketball. I can do amazing tricks with the ball. And again, getting an autistic person to engage in their special interests is a great way into getting them to communicate, because they're happy to talk about the things that they're most interested in. Who wouldn't be? But obviously, autistic people can take it a lot further very often than neurotypical people. And again, that knowing how to start a conversation, how to end it and when to end it, and that period in the middle can be very, very difficult for autistic people. So they have the beginning, the content, and the end that can be difficult for autistic individuals. So autistic people may have difficulties interpreting both verbal and non-verbal language, like gestures, facial expressions, or tone of voice. That lady there's obviously looking a little bit cheesed off, shall we say, a little bit angry. But again, if that person is avoiding eye contact, or that autistic person or facial has problems with facial recognition, might not appreciate that is an angry face, but may spot the finger, but might not even know what that means either. So that can be quite difficult. And again, many people with high functioning autism have been diagnosed as having Asperger's syndrome, or they call themselves ASPI. The reason why I'm mentioning this here, and I said I'd bring this in context a bit later, is that Asperger's syndrome is named after an Austrian called Hans Asperger. That it has a prominent G. No, it's not Asperger that people often say. It's Asperger. It's German. But he was allegedly, and probably true, involved in eugenics in Germany. So he was trying to find these quirky young people with autistic traits or autism that had a high intellect and had skills like engineering, science, etc., that could be of value to the Third Reich. Those that hadn't, that were the more lower IQ and being on the autistic spectrum, were discarded, and many, unfortunately, ended up in the gas chambers along with Jews and other minorities. So you can appreciate why, even though he's famous for his work on autism and had his name associated with Asperger's syndrome from 1981 onwards, a lot of people now are distancing that term. But for others, they like to continue to use the word Asperger because they like to be separated from just the word autism, because autism for many, unfortunately, means Rain Man. It doesn't, where Asperger's aligns more to someone like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, someone who's it's intellectual but different, and they'd rather have that alliance than there would be with someone with a learning disability. People with Asperger's syndrome will often have an average or above average IQ. I myself was diagnosed originally as Asperger's. Were I to be diagnosed now, everybody would be, I'd be umbrellaed under the autism spectrum disorder, or classed as autistic. Children with Asperger's syndrome usually highly verbal and can say things which may appear rude. The only real difference when they were using the term Asperger's syndrome in new diagnoses between an Asperger child and a child with high functioning autism was that children with high functioning autism did not have, children with high functioning autism had language delay. Those with Asperger's syndrome did not normally have a language delay. They're usually highly verbal, and they may be like little professors, but they also may say things that may appear rude. Like this young lad here, he got a spot on your nose because he's realised, he's noticed something about you that standing up feature. Now, we would all think that, oh my Lord, look at the size of the spot on that person's nose. But society teaches us that it's impolite to say those things. A person with autism may not have that social filter to realise there's certain things you think, but you don't say. And then sometimes autistic people may speak in a robotic or monotone type of voice or change their voice when they talk. For example, some autistic people can be quite flat when they speak. I once supported somebody who very much talked like this, and they tell a joke, say, I don't know what's come over me. Oh, yes, I do. A bus, a taxi, and a car. Very, very monotonous, monotone. Others may be quite expressive in the talk, but may have a different accent to the parents. Some learn to speak through watching American television. So you get a lot of autistic children that talk with an American accent, or you get some children that talk posh. Certainly my daughter, when she was speaking, used to speak very, very posh compared to my working class Northamptonshire accent. This young lad here, I like to speak an American accent. I like to watch American movies all the time. And sometimes autistic people very often learn social skills by observing others. And sometimes a way to do that is through watching films, watching television, watching plays, and that sort of thing, or just being the outside of a group rather than actually joining in the conversation. So on to social interaction. Autistic people often have difficulty recognizing or understanding others' feelings and intentions and expressing their own emotions. This can make it very hard for them in social situations. They may appear to be insensitive, seek out time alone, that personal space, that personal time when overloaded by other people, not seek comfort from other people, and appear to behave strangely or in a way thought to be socially inappropriate. For example, my daughter, when she was young, she hated being hugged. She hated being human contact, and would turn away. So the only time she would come to us for comfort was generally when she wasn't very well or she'd hurt herself. The rest of the time, it's kind of like, no, you keep your space there. I don't want to be touched. I find it uncomfortable. And again, it mentions here about may behave in a way that's thought to be socially inappropriate. I quite like the term socially inappropriate. I hate the term, and I know later I'm going to briefly discuss behaviour. I do not like the term good or bad behaviour. There's no such thing. Behaviour is relative to the social context in which it's in. Even murder, for example, most people consider murder to be an evil act, but in war, people are trained to kill their fellow man. So it's not the action, it's the context in which it's in. And it's the same with other behaviours as well. For example, more inappropriate, what we consider to be more inappropriate behaviours, such as, I don't know, swearing or sexualized behaviours in a private place might be appropriate, in a public place not socially appropriate. So again, there's no such thing as good or bad behavior. It's a social context, and some autistic people lack that innate ability that humans have, that they absorb like a sponge from the people around you, from their society. That they lack that ability to understand what's socially inappropriate at all times, and it's something that they have to learn for themselves by trial and error, or through special education or whatever that they require. So again, this young lad here, I find it hard to make friends. I'd like to make friends, but I don't know how to. I mean, how does one make a friend? It's not like you can literally just go to I don't know, Toys R Us and make one, or create one out of clay or plasticine. It, but we are gregarious species, and humans are naturally drawn to other humans, even from a very young age. A baby will react to another baby crying, for example. A toddler will be fascinated if it sees another toddler playing with something. That natural curiosity is going to see what they're doing. Autistic people may be curious, but may not want, if they did that, would be playing on their own. They wouldn't want to communicate with the other child. And these are the issues that make friendship forming very, very difficult. And again, if you're not sure what to say, you're not sure how to approach somebody, how difficult it must be to make friends. For those of you who are not autistic and you're responding or watching this video, consider that every time you meet somebody, it's like the first time for very often, that uncomfortable nature that you have on a first date. Imagine if like that every time, that butterfly in your stomach, that nervousness, every time you meet somebody new, on every single occasion. And for some autistic people, it's that constant angst every single time they meet somebody new, or they see more than one or two people together, and thinking, how do I join this conversation? How do I join this group? What if they don't like me? That sort of thing. Feelings that everybody else experiences. An autistic person, it's magnified 100,000 times. And again, this young lad here, I do not get jokes. Now, it's a myth that autistic people do not understand humor, but some do not understand the vagaries of the English language. Some humor is wordplay, and if they don't understand that not everything that somebody says is literal, then they may not get the joke, so they may get bullied at school. Others, particularly those of us with a fairly good intellect, I like to consider, do get jokes, but or we may have a quirky sense of humor that's a bit different to other people. We may laugh at somebody falling over because something like you've been framed is funny, but it's not funny if someone falls over and they genuinely are really badly hurt, and we may laugh inappropriate for that. So sometimes they may get jokes, or they may laugh inappropriately at things that most people would not view as funny. This young man here, I'm not really interested in having friends. I like to be on my own. I should know this, but my brain fog, another autistic trait. Someone once said, "No man's an island." But for some autistic people, because of the difficulty they have with friendships and socializing, they're happier in their own company. But when you're young, particularly when you're a child, you're encouraged to make friends. You're almost forced to. And if you're autistic, that can be a very, very difficult thing to do. Go and make friends. Well, I already mentioned, how do you start? But again, if it's quite difficult to do that, then you draw into yourself and thinking, well, I want to be on my own. And to be honest, who doesn't at times want to be on their own? But autistic person may do that to the nth degree, because life is hard, and if you have to socialize with people that you cannot get on the same wavelength with them because of your autism, that can be very draining. So spending time in your own company is fine, and as adults, it's particularly, obviously children as well, but for adults, it's important for every autistic person that they have that, they're given that opportunity to have time on their own. If they're in the working environment and everybody's having a meal around the table, and they decide to sit on the table on their own, it's not necessarily that they are being rude. They just find eating in company difficult, making chit chat difficult. So they're quite happy in their own company. Others would feel excluded and they want to be in that company, but find it difficult. So again, every autistic person is unique. And again, autistic people understanding and relating to other people and taking part in everyday family, school, work, and social life can be very challenging. That young lad there has basically made a den out of cushions in order to shut the world out and just cocoon themselves away from everybody else. And he's doing this. He gets disturbed every time there's visitors. And again, autistic people find change difficult to cope with. Unfortunately, life is full of change. We are in a constant stage of flux. You know, there's always something going to happen. In England, we have the weather. We have, you know, if you go to work or school, the teacher or your boss could be away. There could be somebody else in their place for the day. How do you cope with that? Different personality, different way of doing things, maybe even different rules. How do you deal with that? Most people would find that quite uncomfortable. An autistic person, greatly so. And what happens if you take your swimming kit to school because it's a Tuesday and you're going to go swimming today and there's no swimming? You in your mind you've got swimming on your head. I'm going to be going swimming at 11 o'clock. There's a problem with the swimming pool or something, or another school's got another activity going on and you can't do that. Your plans for the day have been thwarted. Now, for most people that'd be an annoyance, but for autistic people, it's more than just an annoyance. It is their way of coping through life is very often through that routine, through that structure. It helps them to deal with all the sensory issues, all the social difficulties that they have. And if there's an enforced change on them, especially at last minute, it can be very, very difficult for them to deal with, and they end up having betraying what's known as challenging behaviours. This young lad here, exactly what example I just said, bit upset because teacher was not in school today. And sometimes children may even think teacher's not in today, or maybe I've upset the teacher, may think it's their fault. No, that they may be going beyond the reason for the teacher's away and overthinking it. And that's something that a lot of autistic people do. Sometimes we overthink and think, oh, the teacher's not upset today, or maybe I did something wrong in class yesterday, maybe I've upset him. And again, for those adults or children that have care support, sometimes when a carer leaves and there's been no chance for that carer to say goodbye, because sometimes there isn't, it can be quite difficult then for that autistic individual to not feel like it's personally their fault, because they've had no real explanation why that person no longer there, like they've got another job or whatever. And sometimes just telling them that is a good answer. You don't need to go into great detail. So again, this young lad here, I need to have some time out when I'm very upset. We all need that. Autistic people need that need longer and more frequent time out when things get too much. So it's a good idea if you're in a classroom environment or working environment as an adult, have a place near a door so that person can slip away quietly, gets a bit of time and space, and then comes back in when there's calm, without disrupting everybody else, drawing attention to themselves, which raises their anxiety even more. So these are little things to consider. And again, I'll be looking at supporting children and adults in a later module. Some autistic people wonder why they are different and feel that people don't understand them. Yeah. And again, that's discernment, the ability to understand that other people may perceive us differently, in the same way that, you know, there's a lady called Claire Sainsbury who summed it up when she wrote a book called Martian in the Playground, which is when she described herself, it's almost like she felt almost as if she'd been beamed into her family from outer space by the Star Trek Enterprise or something. And again with school, because she felt she was the odd one out, and being a girl even more so, because girls tend to do something called masking, where they try to control their anxious behavior, try to control their senses. And so they might come across as shy and smiley, but the smile's really grimace. And when they leave the school environment, they have a massive meltdown. They explode, and the parents get the full force of that because they've got all these issues. So whether sensory issues, the feeling that people don't understand them, that they're weird. It's kind of, you know, if autism, it's kind of like, imagine if you're in a foreign country, with a totally different culture, where they speak a totally different language, and you're expected from the moment you get off that plane to fully integrate. You can't. Nobody can. And autistic people, it's kind of like that, maybe like that at school. They've been encouraged to fully integrate, and they can't, because the children are, because of how they think and behave, are being communicating in a language that's alien to them. So they can feel very, very isolated and full of anxiety, away from just the sensory issues, socially anxious as well, because they want to fit in, they want to have friends, but have no idea how to start. And then on to sensory issues, just ideally, just as I mentioned there, says for some people, autistic people, the touch of something, the taste of something, excuse me, the smell of something can cause anxiety or even physical pain. But when you talk about sensory issues, they often describe things as being hyper up there or hypo down here. Hyper is when you're very heightened sensitivity to something. Hypo, reduced sensitivity. And autistic people and generally either sense seekers, or they avoid that sensation. But some of us are a mixed bag. You often, one of the things you often to recognize a young child often, or even an adult with autism in public, is that they may be wearing ear defenders. I mean, at the moment I'm not wearing ear defenders. I'm wearing headphones because of this video. But again, wearing ear defenders because it blots out all the excessive noise. It enables you to concentrate your thoughts on what you're doing and actually just shut out the world. And again, they should be allowed, if they're in the classroom situation, they should be allowed to do this, to be able to muffle those sounds, because there's too much information going on. And if there's too much information, then you can't then process what is being the important information. For example, my daughter, when she was very young, once she wanted me to eliminate this sound that was making a scream, and I tried everything in the house. I shut off the radios off, the television was off, the cooker was off, washing machine, anything that made a noise. And it turned out to be by process of elimination, the extractor fan from the downstairs toilet, which was the furthest point in the house from her bedroom, but she could hear that above all the cacophony of sound that was going on in the house. She could hear that above that, and it was that sound that was causing her physical pain, not just uncomfortable, sometimes physical pain. And likewise, when on the subject of pain, some people that are autistic can have an extremely high pain threshold. They can be walking on a leg that's broken, and not aware that it's broken. And conversely, that same individual may have the most gentlest, or choose this as a pencil, you can see, most gentlest movement touching on their skin, and that mere movement there of the pencil going against my lovely arm hairs would be extremely painful. So again, it's not always a case of high and low. Sometimes it's a mixed bag with the same emotions, but all autistic people will have a unique sensory profile and a profile that is very different to most neurotypical individuals. Again, lunch times, play times, physical education when you're at schools, lessons, assemblies, there's all times where that lack of structure, oh, you've got freedom now, guys, is a large number of pupils. The unpredictability and noise can become overwhelming for autistic children. The reason, because there's just so much going on. There's so much, all your senses are being assaulted. You've got sweaty Nelly next to you, who hasn't had a wash for a week, or it smells like it's, or someone's got strong perfume one side. You've then got kids running around and screaming. You've got the scratch of the ball against the tarmac and the back, the crack as it hits the fence, and you've got school bell going off. You've got cars go up and down the street in this picture. All those sort of things together, sight, sounds, smells, etc. Just too much information coming in, and you can end up having a sensory overload or sensory meltdown, because it's just so much information coming in. Your brain can't process it all, and so you're going to shut down, or you present challenging behaviors. So again, many autistic people say the world overwhelms them, and this causes them great anxiety. And again, like I just mentioned, this is what we mean by sensory overload. Got an example there, I think, of a kid. I presume it's a firework that's landed that tarmac there. So that bang of that firework and the smell of the chemicals from the firework is an assault to his senses, and he's been very uncomfortable there. So again, autistic people may experience, I've mentioned before, over and under sensitivity to sounds and noises, may find certain background sounds which other people can ignore or black out unbearably loud or distracting. And a lot of people, many autistic people, dislike crowds because you've got two sensory issues. You've got lots of people, so you've got the social aspect of lots and lots of people, but you've got that great cacophony of sound. You've got everybody speaking at once, possibly in different volumes, different tones, some probably even in different languages. If you're something like a busy city centre, you're hearing that assault to your senses all the time. It can be very, very, very difficult to cope with. And this child here, I don't like balloons because they might burst and it makes a loud noise. That's the problem with balloons, isn't it? They may look pretty, but when they pop, it's a shock. Now, most people will jump if a balloon goes off and they're not expecting it. But that loud noise can actually cause physical pain for some people that are autistic. So not just being uncomfortable, give actual pain. And again, this young lad here, some noises make me really upset. And again, like I've mentioned, can cause him to have a meltdown. Again, I've already mentioned this, but the young lady here is wearing ear defenders to block out some of the noise. And again, you often find sometimes they'll wear an ear defender, or they'll be listening to music, because if they listen to their own music, the sound of that music is blotting out the other sounds, and it allows them to calm. Imagine yourself if you're not autistic, you know, and you're in a something like a library or somewhere, or church somewhere where it's supposed to be quiet, and someone's making a lot of noise. It can be very, very distracting. Imagine if you multiply that 1,000 times, that could be that autistic person's experience every time they go to a crowded place. Again, some children find the feel of clothing touching their skin unbearable. For instance, although I do own pairs of jeans, I don't actually like wearing them very often because they're itchy to the skin. They're quite rough against the skin. Nylon is a no-no for me. Anything nylon, you can forget that. Labels can be very uncomfortable. I don't mind labels, but many autistic people find them very, very uncomfortable, so may cut the light or rip the labels off things. And that can cause problems at school because kids have to have everything labeled, don't they? So it may be a good idea instead to iron on labels rather than sew them on, so they're nice and flat against the clothing, rather than have a little loop there, or put the label in a place that's less obtrusive, you know. Excuse me. Socks can be particularly annoying to many children with autism. The most awkward things to put on are socks. I mean, I really, even though I've worked in care for many years, I really hate putting socks on other people. Not only because essentially the smell of lovely smell of feet, but they're blooming awkward things to put on, aren't they? So again, a lot of autistic people may prefer to run around either wear no socks or run around with nothing on the feet at all. And again, many autistic people can become upset by certain sudden bursts of a chorus, like the happy birthday song, because not only is it you've got loads of people singing at the same time, not all of them in tune, I must have to say. You've then got that clapping and cheering and all that follows, and you got blowing out the candle. They may not like the smell of the cord or carbon when the candles have been blown out. So all that noise can be just too much for them. Young lady here, I don't like it when a lot of people pray together. It makes me really anxious. I don't know how many of you go to church, but if you go to church, whether they do communal praying, like they say the Lord's Prayer or whatever, you always get, even when people are reading it out loud and they're following the minister, you're always going to get somebody that's going to say it at a different speed to somebody else, and so it becomes, not only is it in itself that, you know, it may be like a whisper, that it's a very loud whisper. It's like, again, another cacophony of sound, another assault to the senses. And again, some autistic children have a constant need for sensory stimulation, stimulation. These are the sensory seekers, as I mentioned earlier, and many enjoy playing with water, sand, porridge oats, you know, anything that's gooey and sticky. Play-Doh is another one, and sometimes these sensory seekers will even play with their own feces, which can cause and smear, which obviously is a very socially inappropriate form of behaviour. And again, so, but the aim of most therapies now is not to stop that behaviour, but find a safer alternative. So if a person plays with the feces, find some Play-Doh that they can play with, so that still get that sensation without doing something that's obviously socially inappropriate and unhygienic. And again, feeling running water, going through your hands can be calming and soothing for them. But if you do that too much, you can obviously get quite sore fingers as well from too much water. Again, some autistic individuals are oblivious to extreme cold or heat. An autistic child may, as I mentioned earlier, may break an arm or leg and yet never cry. Against those extremes of cold and heat, I supported a young man when I worked in autistic day services, that whatever the weather would wear this thick black coat. Height of summer, even last week, if I would have been spotted in when the temperature was in the UK was 40 odd degrees, he would have still been wearing that coat, unless somebody actually advised him it's not a good idea, health grounds, because you're going to be really, really ill. You're going to overheat. So again, or they may wear that because they've not been told not to. For example, my son used to be ill on the school bus. I'm used to think, oh, he's travel sick. It turned out it wasn't really travel sick. It's the fact that he'd wear a coat on his trip. We're told you don't go to school without your coat. And they say, take your coats to the coach. But unless a teacher told him, you can take your coat off now, you're in the coach, and you know you don't need to have full uniform, full coat on, you know, when you're in a hot coach, he wouldn't put his hand up and ask, because he didn't know, you know, he wasn't socially aware, so he would literally throw up because he was overheating. And again, and not always aware of that. And again, one thing is not really brushed up in here, but will be on a later module, is the sense of proprioception, of understanding and the sensations we're given out from our own body. That, you know, you're feeling a bit uncomfortable in your stomach. Is it because you're hungry? Is it because you're thirsty? Is it because you need a wee? Is it because you need poo? Is it because you're anxious? You know, all those feelings, and understanding those body signals. So sometimes an autistic person may have an accident or wet themselves, not because of incontinence, but because they've not felt that feeling, not felt that they actually needed to go, and they may be so engrossed in something then that they're not realizing that feeling. And so as a result of these frustration, anxieties, inability to communicate and interact, many autistic young people can have major meltdowns. Obviously adults can as well, but for many adults like myself at the more higher end of the spectrum, have learned coping strategies purely through experience and as well as help from other people. So again, please do not judge me or my child. He's not being naughty. He has autism. Now, whenever I see a little darling like this boy here screaming and shouting in the supermarket, at the back of my head, there's always that. I always think of these four letters, CIBA. Could it be autism? Now that child there's obviously a toddler or only just starting school. Now, when they're really small, a 3-year-old doing that, it's just a little. It's a 3-year-old having a tantrum, you know, and why can't the parent control it or whatever? And there may be a case of, oh, bless, you know, he's obviously tired and all that. But when the child's doing that when they're 9, 10 years old, then the default for most people is, look at the parents. Why aren't they controlling that child? Why is that child behaving in such an inappropriate way? But to take a step back before you judge the parents and the child and think, could it be autism? Now, and again, special interests, rituals, and repetitive behaviors is another sign of autism. many autistic people have intense and highly focused interests, some to the point of obsession, often from a young age. These can change over time or be lifelong. They can be anything from art or music to trains and computers. I really like this picture because it's a girl with a horse. Now, first of all, there are people that even now that think autism is generally just a boy thing. And gradually we are, as society, waking up to the fact that girls have it too. But also, not every person that's autistic loves trains. Many do. Many love Thomas the Tank Engine. Many might be into train spotting. Many might like cars, planes, inanimate objects and things like that, mechanical things, maybe fascinated by them. But not everybody. Everybody who's autistic will have a special interest of some kind, but not everybody will be interested in exactly the same thing. Everybody is different. Now, behind, you probably can't see from this film here, but behind here, I'll just get one down if you can see it. Behind there, we have, oh, I don't know if you can see it there in front of the camera. Yep, you can there. There's a Dalek. I absolutely am a massive fan of Doctor Who. I've been following it since I was 4, way back in 1970. And again, having a Dalek, you might think, oh, that's nothing special. You like Doctor Who. But I've got dozens of them. I've got the whole of this bookcase here is Doctor Who. I've got Doctor Who DVDs. I've got Doctor Who books. I've got Doctor Who models. I've got Doctor Who ornaments. But one thing I've learned as an adult and a married man who's autistic is it's great having all this, this special interest in Doctor Who, but maybe not such a good idea if you're married to have all that in the living room, because then the wife says to it, one day, like mine did, where's this leave me? What is there of mine in this room? And I learned a little bit from that experience. So again, this little girl here, I love horses. I like write them and draw them all the time. And again, animals is quite a common thing amongst autistic people because animals generally don't judge you. Animals are often more supportive, in many cases more loving than humans can be, because there is no other side to them. Many animals are loyal to an extent that you would never find humans naturally that loyal. And again, many autistic people have specific and obsessive interests. Not too keen on the word obsessive, but I've kept it in here because that is how neurotypical people may perceive their behavior as. But I prefer the term as specific or special interest, which are very important to their well-being and happiness. And they can talk at length about their interests. And if you like, I could spend the next 6-7 hours talking about 50 plus years of watching Doctor Who. But I'm sure after the first 5 seconds, unless you're a Doctor Who fan, your eyes are going to start glazing over, and certainly before the 5 hours are out. Now, and again, not every autistic person has discernment and is aware that their special interest that really, really fascinates them isn't equally fascinating to another person. And that excitement might not rub off on another person, and they can find that quite difficult sometimes to grasp that. Why don't you understand? Why aren't you a fan of trains? Why don't you think Doctor Who's brilliant like I do? And it's that, again, that discernment, the ability to accept that person's likes and dislikes might be different to mine. And even some autistics even find it sometimes difficult to understand how different autistic people can think differently to them as well. That concept is quite difficult as well. So again, the world, as I mentioned earlier, is a very unpredictable and confusing place. It's also quite unforgiving place at times for autistic people. Many prefer to have a daily routine so that they know what's going to happen next. They want to always travel the same way to and from school, or eat exactly the same food for breakfast. And again, it's that familiarity. And also when looking at food, it's this, again, essentially need with the same texture as the food every time. So again, and particularly if you've had a stressful day, isn't it a comfort, whether autistic or not, to come home and that familiarity is there? And for autistic people, they need that much more than a neurotypical person. So again, it'd be difficult to gain the attention sometimes of somebody who's autistic because of their sensory issues that they may have closed themselves off to your conversation or to what you're trying to tell them. So and they do not always see the bigger picture and can easily become sidetracked. I love this. I love this slide with the moving Lego man. Then again, many autistic people will show restricted, ritualistic, and repetitive patterns of behaviours, activities, or interests from early childhood. Now, just because your little Jimmy or your little Percy is stacking tins, it doesn't mean he's autistic. Just because they're lining cars up, it doesn't mean they're autistic. But it may be an indicator of autism if they're doing this every day. If they're not doing it for a few minutes, but they're doing it for hours on a time. Because again, it's not just there's very few autistic behaviors that are unique to autism, but it's the extent that makes that behavior an autistic behavior. Excuse me. For example, like I said, all kids will line up objects. It's quite a common thing to do. But it's the extent to which they do that. And young children do not generally have, particularly under fives, do not have the attention span to do any activity for very long. And if you see a child doing, lining up cars for an hour at a time, and they're under 5, that would speak to me definite obsessive behavior, more likely there's an autism in the mix there. Again, like this little boy's repetitive ritual to make a line of his toys before going to sleep. So again, he's got that. Again, he's in control of his environment because environment is, as we mentioned, is unpredictable. So he gets control. So he'll only go to sleep when everything's all lined up just as it should be. But it also means, hopefully, when he wakes up, that familiarity will still be there the next day. So that is that comfort that everything's in its right place. So when I wake up in the morning, everything's in the right place. So all's well with the world. So, but woe betide if mum and dad moves one of those toys. It can be literally living hell to that child when they wake up. So again, autistic people often engage in repetitive behaviours such as hand flapping is quite common, or they put their hand on their ears and this sort of thing like that. Or rock is very, very common behaviours. Spinning or twirling, head banging, and other movements. And these tend to occur during times of heightened emotions such as anxiety or excitement. Now, again, once more, these behaviours aren't unique to autism. It's the extent to which a person does that. If you see somebody at a car accident, for example, that they're uninjured, but they've seen a lot of carnage on the road, they may go into the fetal position and rock because of the severe stress they're in. The difference is that's a one-off. They're not doing it all the time. They're not doing this excessive pacing all the time, not finger flicking or clicking the fingers all the time. You're not drilling the fingers all the time, which again, and some of these behaviors can cause issues in school because they may be distracted to the teacher and the class. Again, some engage in repetitive use of an object, such as flicking a rubber band or twirling a piece of string, or other repetitive actions. For example, pen twirling. I don't know why it was this morning. This morning I was giving a talk to a group of music publishers, and for some reason, unbeknown to science, I was just fiddling. I happened to find a nail clipper in my office, and I don't know who put it there. It doesn't really matter. Spent all the time I was talking, subconsciously probably, I was fiddling with this nail clipper here all the time. Give me that sort of, it helped me to relax during the talk, and it gave me sort of that sense of comfort. And this sort of behavior, this sort of self-stimulating behavior, is known as stimming. You may have heard that term. So again, some autistic children may be fascinated by spinning objects, either spinning them themselves or watching objects that spin. I've known people that will literally, their idea of fun for relaxation could be literally just watching particularly young children, maybe watching the tumble dryer going around on, or the washing machine going around. They may be bothered by the noise. They wear ear defenders, so they're blocking out the noise, but they're fascinated at just seeing that repetitive movement, almost hypnotized by it. Again, some autistic people also have fixation with lights as well. So it's anything that grab their attention and able them to blot out everything else that's going on in the world and keeps them calm. Said this young lad here, I like all different kind of lights, he says. Now, this young man here, when I was young, I used to flap my hand a lot when I was scared and when I was excited. I've managed to control this on the whole now, but there are still times when it just happens. And again, when you said there are times when this just happens, but that could, the happenings could be because he's happy in that environment. You know, people around him are accepting for him who he is, so he's able to flap his hands without people being judgmental. You know, and a lot of the strategies used to support people that are autistic are maybe things like where they try and like ABA, applied behaviour analysis, where they try to get that child to stop their behaviours. Oh, it's annoying, you're distracting the teacher, you're distracting mum and dad by constantly flapping all the time. Can we stop it? Now, they're not really doing any harm by doing that. So maybe, but if they need to do that in order to then be able to concentrate in class, the harm you are doing by stopping that child from doing this behaviour they need to do, just so your life as a teacher or parent is easier, in inverted commas, is immeasurable. So it may be a case of, well, you can't be doing that all the time because you're distracting the class. Maybe beginning and end of the lesson, have a period when you can do that, you know, because you need to, or find a safer alternative, that self-stimulating behavior that's less distracting to others, but you're still able to get that sensory need, fulfill that sensory need. So that's it for this current presentation. Thank you for listening. And so my name's David Crisp, autism trainer and speaker from Wired for Autism. If you like what you see, please leave a comment. Please review my business on Google. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And I'd just like to conclude by saying thank you very much for your time, and join me next time I present one of these training sessions. Thank you.